Tokyo, midnight. A bloodied knife. Sirens wailing. A man stands still in the rain, his past behind him, his fate sealed. Steelhead came to Japan for love, but was dragged into a world of gangs, betrayal, and blood. He wasn't a killer. But when you're illegal and invisible, survival changes you. This isn't about heroes. It's about how far a man will go when he has nothing left to lose. This is the Shinjuku Incident. In the beginning of the story, we see a group of undocumented migrants who have escaped from China and arrived in Japan. Shortly after, a Japanese police officer notices them. As soon as one of them spots the officer, panic sets in, and a violent altercation takes place, resulting in the officer being fatally wounded. Amidst the chaos, a commotion breaks out, allowing the group to slip into Japan unlawfully. From this group, we are introduced to a man named Nick. With nothing in his possession, Nick breaks into a house and takes clothes and shoes to survive. Having entered Japan via a risky sea route, he begins searching for his old friend Jay, a fellow Chinese national who had previously moved to Japan. As Nick wanders through the city, his main concern is avoiding the attention of the authorities. He remains cautious, not wanting to be caught. During this time, we're shown a flashback of Nick's life in China, where he used to drive a tractor and lived a simple but content life. Nick's girlfriend, Yuko, had dreams of moving to Japan to earn a better income. She had promised Nick that once she became financially stable, she would return to China and reunite with him. Nick had been happy and supportive of her ambitions. However, many years have now passed, and Yuko has not returned. Nick learns that Yuko used to live with her aunt in Japan, but her aunt has since passed away, and now, no one seems to know where Yuko is or what happened to her. Terrified and deeply worried, Nick makes up his mind. He will go to Japan and bring Yuko back. At this point, the story shifts into a prequel-like moment, where Nick finally locates his friend Jay's residence. Jay lives in a cramped, rented space. Inside that small room, he shares the space with around 15 to 20 other people, all of whom have also arrived in Japan from China without documentation. Nick, weak from hunger after not eating for days, quickly devours whatever food he can find. After eating, he joins Jay to clean up, and Jay takes him to a public bathhouse. However, inside the bathhouse, members of the Yakuza gang are already there. Their leader makes a rude and threatening remark about people from China, which frightens both Nick and Jay. Trying to stay calm, Nick quietly tells Jay that he has come to Japan to find Yuko. Jay advises him that before searching for her, he needs to secure some kind of work. So, the two of them set out looking for a job. Eventually, they meet a man who, after taking a small fee, helps them get work collecting trash. The next morning, we see Nick and Jay working at a garbage processing facility. While working, Nick notices a man named Tai in danger as a pile of trash is about to fall on him. At the same time, local authorities arrive in the area. Without hesitating, Nick and Jay rescue Tai from the falling debris. Grateful for their help, Tai gives them a few phone cards that can be used for small purchases. Jay explains that these cards are not legally obtained, but many in their situation use them to get by. With these phone cards, they can now afford a few basic essentials. Next, we're shown the funeral of one of Japan's most powerful Yakuza leaders. The entire Yakuza syndicate has gathered to pay their respects. After the chief's passing, a new leader named Mariguchi is appointed. Under Mariguchi's leadership, a few juniors stand out. One of them is Iguchi. However, another member named Tokugawa receives the fewest votes during the selection. Upset and humiliated, Tokugawa leaves the beachside funeral in frustration. Meanwhile, we're introduced to a tough police inspector who has been assigned to track down undocumented Chinese migrants. Back underground, Nick and other migrants are working in a sewer tunnel. Suddenly, the police arrive and surround the entire group. The officers line everyone up and bring in a translator to question them. Unfortunately, the translator's Chinese is poor, making communication difficult. As a result, the inspector, Kitano, steps forward to speak in his limited and broken Chinese. While questioning continues, an officer tries to handcuff one of the migrants, causing panic. In the confusion, the group starts fleeing. Inspector Kitano chases after them but accidentally falls into the sewer water. Not knowing how to swim, he begins to struggle. Seeing this, Nick bravely jumps in to save him. Once he confirms that Kitano is safe, Nick quickly escapes the scene. This act leaves a deep impression on Inspector Kitano. Realizing that these migrants are humans with hearts just like anyone else, he quietly vows to repay the life-saving gesture someday. The following day, we see Jay and Nick visiting a local marketplace together. At the market, Nick notices that some people are taking items without much resistance. Surprisingly, no one is there to stop them. Jay then explains to Nick that Japanese people are generally very honest. Because of this, shopkeepers often leave their stores unattended, trusting that customers will take what they need and leave the correct amount of money behind. Later, they head to a black market area where stolen goods are often resold. There, they earn a large sum of money for the items. But Nick is a man of integrity. He doesn't like the idea of benefiting from dishonest work, so he refuses to take any share of the money. Instead, he quietly finds a job washing dishes at a local restaurant. While working, a young woman notices Nick's rough condition. She kindly gives him some money and walks away with an elderly man who appears to be intoxicated. Suddenly, a group of troublemakers shows up and begins harassing the young woman. In the scuffle, the elderly man also gets injured. Nick, seeing what's happening, sets aside his utensils, grabs a metal rod nearby, and bravely steps in to confront the goons. Intimidated, the troublemakers quickly run off. However, the elderly man is badly hurt, and the young woman rushes him away to get medical help. Soon, we learn that the woman owns the bar nearby, and her name is Lily. Out of gratitude, Lily offers Nick more money for helping her. But once again, Nick refuses to accept it. In fact, he even returns the money she gave him earlier. Through these actions, it becomes clear that Nick is a deeply principled and honorable person, guided by his values no matter the situation. A few days later, we see Nick working alongside Jay at a restaurant. One day, Nick notices a man named Iguchi entering the bar with his wife. To his complete shock, Nick realizes that Iguchi's wife is none other than Yuko. Stunned and heartbroken, Nick stares at her. Yuko notices him too. Their eyes meet. Even Iguchi notices the silent exchange between them and grows suspicious. Back at home, Iguchi questions Yuko, asking, "Who was that man who kept staring at you? And why were you looking back at him like that?" Yuko replies that the man was just someone from her village. This revelation deeply breaks Nick's heart. He realizes that no matter how honest or kind someone is, the world doesn't always reward goodness. He comes to believe that without power or influence, a person can't truly survive in this world. Disillusioned, Nick abandons his path of honesty and steps into the world of underground business. He and a group of men begin making money through shady activities, everything from stealing goods to damaging gambling machines for profit. Nick fully immerses himself in this lifestyle, drifting away from his friend Jay, who refuses to be a part of anything illegal. Jay, fearful of the risks and consequences, is kept away from all their unlawful operations. At one point, Nick asks Jay about his plans and what he wants from life. Jay simply replies that he wishes to live a peaceful, ordinary life, perhaps run a small peanut stall, something simple and honest. Nick is surprised by Jay's humble dream. In gratitude for Jay's simplicity and honest dreams, Nick and his men buy him a small peanut stall, which brings Jay immense joy. He's thrilled to have a legitimate way to earn money. Around this time, on New Year's Day, Jay brings Lily along to celebrate, as she has become a very close friend of his. Nick, on the other hand, is making a lot of money from his new ventures. Meanwhile, Jay is happily feeding a local gangster's daughter with affection and care. However, the girl's father sees this and becomes furious. He summons Jay to his house and beats him severely. When Nick hears about this, he's enraged. He gathers 2 or 3 of his men and sets out to confront the local gangster. At the gangster's place, they're vastly outnumbered, but Nick and his friends stand firm. They use whatever they can find to fight back. Just as things look tough, more of Nick's friends arrive, and together, they overpower the gangsters. The fight causes a scene, and the police soon show up. Nick, realizing he needs to get away quickly, rushes to grab Jay's peanut stall. By the time Nick arrives, Inspector Kitano is already on the scene. To Nick's surprise, instead of arresting him, Kitano thanks him. Kitano recalls the day Nick saved his life in the sewer, and now he's repaying the favor by distracting the police long enough for Nick to escape with the peanut stall. After the confrontation at the gaming parlor, Nick asks Jay to wait by the gaming machines for a while, until he returns. While Jay sits there, a man named Gao approaches and accuses him of tampering with the machines. Jay explains that he's here for the first time and only sells peanuts outside, but Gao doesn't listen. He aggressively drags Jay out of the parlor. As Jay is being dragged away, Tai, who was nearby, sees the scene unfold. He quickly runs to find Nick and tells him everything that happened. Together, they rush to the gaming parlor to rescue Jay. However, by the time they arrive, Gao has already severely beaten Jay, leaving him with many bruises and injuries. But that wasn't enough for Gao. He goes so far as to cut off one of Jay's hands, reasoning that without a hand, Jay won't be able to play the game again. Jay, who had always been one of the kindest and most honorable of the group, is left in a devastating condition. When Nick and the others finally arrive, Nick demands that Gao return Jay's severed hand. But Gao, cold and ruthless, crushes the hand, further showing his cruelty. At this point, Nick realizes that there's no way to reason with Gao, so he rushes Jay to his home instead. Since they're living illegally in Japan, going to a hospital would involve the police and possibly cause trouble. So, Nick calls in a doctor to treat Jay at home, ensuring that his friend gets medical attention without involving the authorities. While Jay is being treated, Nick becomes very emotional seeing his friend suffer. Unable to bear it any longer, Nick decides to take matters into his own hands. He heads to the club alone, determined to get revenge for Jay. Carrying a sword, Nick arrives just as a meeting between Gao and Iguchi is about to take place. Iguchi has already arrived, and it's clear that the village is planning something dangerous for Iguchi. Nick watches from the shadows, realizing that the villagers are preparing to attack Iguchi. They take out a knife, ready to end Iguchi's life. Just as the villager attempts to strike Iguchi, Nick steps forward and intervenes, stopping the attack, much like how he had once saved Jay's life. In the chaos that follows, both Iguchi and Nick escape together. Iguchi takes Nick to his home, where Nick meets Yuko and Iguchi's daughter. Impressed by Nick's courage, Iguchi offers him a job. However, Nick refuses to work for him under those conditions. The next day, Iguchi visits Nick's house with an offer. This time, Nick agrees to take on the job, but with one condition. He needs legal status in Japan. Iguchi, who wants to take down his enemies, agrees and gives Nick a large sum of money in return for his help. Nick accepts the job and starts working diligently. His actions stir up a storm in the city, as violent riots break out between rival Yakuza factions. The streets are filled with chaos, and murders begin to happen everywhere. After successfully eliminating all his enemies, Iguchi becomes the undisputed boss. As promised, Nick is now responsible for taking care of Shizuku. In the meantime, the people who once looked down on Nick and his men now begin to show respect and bow before them. Once Nick takes care of Shizuku, he decides to close all illegal businesses in the area. He gathers his friends and tells them he's planning to start fresh. Nick wants to leave the world of crime behind and run a legitimate business, so they decide to open a restaurant, ensuring they stay out of the police's radar. Everyone is excited about this new direction, except for Jay. Jay is deeply unhappy, having changed drastically since the traumatic incident where he lost a hand and suffered severe injuries to his face. The man he once was is gone, and he feels lost. Nick notices that Jay seems neglected and frustrated, and so he decides to give Jay part of his territory to run his own business, hoping it will help him. Years pass, and Jay has completely transformed. He's now working alongside Iguchi, fully immersed in illegal activities. He has become a ruthless and violent person, leading his own gang, dealing with drugs, and causing trouble in the streets. Nick has been out of touch with Jay for a while, unaware of his drastic change. However, one day, Inspector Kitano visits Nick and informs him that his old friend Jay is now involved in Iguchi's drug business, working with criminals. Devastated by the news that Jay has gone down such a dark path, Nick feels a deep sense of betrayal. He's always wanted his friends to stay away from crime, and now he faces the harsh reality that one of his closest friends has become part of it. Nick promises Inspector Kitano that he will talk to his friend, Jay. However, Kitano places one more condition in front of him. If Nick can provide evidence against Iguchi, the police will not pursue him. Lily also advises Nick to cooperate with the inspector, but Nick is hesitant. He doesn't want to betray his friends because they were the ones who gave him food and shelter when he had nothing. In a moment of vulnerability, Nick confesses to the inspector that he has killed 2 people at Iguchi's command. Upon hearing this, Lily becomes furious. She slaps Nick and tells him that he is sacrificing himself for friends who don't care about him. Despite Lily's anger, Nick decides to stand with Inspector Kitano. Nick takes Kitano to his main hideout, where they discover that others are also involved in Jay's drug business. Nick then tells everyone there that they need to leave this illegal business behind. He offers them a chance for a fresh start, work with him and testify against Iguchi, and they will be saved. Just as Nick is speaking, one of the men named Tai suddenly slashes his friend's neck. Nick, horrified, realizes that he could be next. But just as Tai is about to attack him, a stone comes flying through the window and hits Tai on the head. Looking around, Nick sees stones starting to fall from all directions. It becomes clear that this attack was orchestrated by Nakajima, Iguchi's right-hand man. Nakajima has his own agenda. He wants to eliminate all Chinese immigrants from Japan. In his quest to rid Japan of immigrants, Nakajima plans to kill Nick and all of his friends, launching a full-scale assault on their hideout with his men. At the hideout, Iguchi is with Nakajima, who is now trying to escape. However, Nakajima shoots Iguchi. As Iguchi is dying, he manages to pull out a pen drive and tells Nakajima to give it to Inspector Kitano. The pen drive contains all the information about the Yakuza's illegal activities. The police arrive at the scene, and Nick, in a wounded condition, runs to find his friend Jay. However, he discovers that Jay is no longer at the hideout. Nick sadly covers Jay's body and then calls Yuko. He informs her that Iguchi is dead. Nick arranges to meet Yuko at a location, but before he arrives, a rival gang of Iguchis has already reached Iguchi's house. They send some of their men to kill Nick. Nick tries to escape, but before the inspector arrives, the gang members inflict severe injuries on him. Nakajima is about to finish him off when Inspector Kitano arrives and shoots Nakajima, saving Nick. The inspector then rushes to the same sewer where Nick once saved his life. There, he finds Nick in a near-death state. The inspector is unable to do anything to help him. In his final moments, Nick gives the pen drive to the inspector, and with that, he dies. His body is swept away in the water of the sewer. And with that, the story comes to an end. He came to find love. But in Shinjuku, love costs blood. And some debts can only be paid with your soul. This was the Shinjuku Incident.